Welcome to This Ain't No Picnic. Today, we're going to be talking about a very damning report that came out of the BCUC recently.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about a report that was sent to them in preparation for the public inquiry into the BC gas prices, which is currently going on and will kind of come to a head in August.
Yeah.
And
this has implications for all of Canada, but it's definitely sort of BC focus on this episode.
Yeah. So back in March of this year, which is 2019, in the Lower Mainland, which is British Columbia in Canada, also in Vancouver Island, the world. The what's this galaxy called again?
The Milky Way.
Milky Way. Yeah.
I feel like we've got to go to another language to find a better name, because the Milky Way is pretty,
I don't like that, but I'm more of a territorial person.
Yeah.
I'm more of a terra firma guy.
Yeah.
But besides that,
I feel like the dairy lobby influenced that name. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly. Especially with the way that they're working.
Yeah.
Especially with Andrew Scheer saying that he thinks that the Canadian health food guide is pure liberal ideological
it's out
nonsense.
Of this galaxy.
Yeah, it's out of this galaxy. There's not enough chocolate milk in there because he force feeds his son tumblers full of chocolate milk instead of anything else because he can't control his son.
Yeah.
So
how's he going to control Xi Jinping?
Yeah, how is he supposed to control all those rogue wingnuts that make up the Conservative Party of Canada?
Even more difficult.
People like Michael Cooper who just sit at home and clean their broadswords and read Canterbury Tales to himself and voices and does the ebook commentary for Oswald Spengler's Decline of the West. That's the kind of fuck he is, and all the people in his party, all those cohorts. But
cohorts to this trouncing of our gas prices in British Columbia here.
It's a travesty. So back in what I was trying to say before I got caught up in the geographical location of where we come from in relation to everything else is that in March of 2019, gas prices in the Lower Mainland spiked up to $1.71 in its more extreme price range, $1.71 per liter, which is the most expensive ever in all of North America. Mm-hmm. So, and people were understandably outraged and annoyed and kind of just curious as to what was going on that brought upon this extreme price hike. Now, a lot of what the mainstream media pundits were putting forth as for the reasons for this price spike was that it was a mixture of taxes, because BC does have a lot of taxes for fuel.
In total we pay, including the federal taxes, we pay something like 54 cents.
Yeah, 54 cents. And so the mainstream media pundits and Jason Kenney, Premier of the United Conservatives in Alberta, and the Calgary Herald, all the papers that are under Postmedia were saying that it's the carbon pricing, but the increase in the carbon pricing for the province in BC was just $1 cent
on that
increase for that year, right?
And then the other excuse is that we have a supply problem, and that our supply is very scarce in BC because of restrictions to our transport to the Trans Mountain Pipeline and the fact that we are taking our oil from the United States. So that's basically what this report is looking into. They're trying to figure out whether those claims are true or false, and generally they found that all of those claims are false. We don't have a scarcity problem. We haven't reached the capacity of the pipeline or our other means of transportation of oil into the BC economy. We have been a net exporter of 2 of the past 4 years, and when we did import gasoline in 2018 and 2015, it was for business reasons, not for supply scarcity reasons. So and even if it was the case that we were taking that 15% of that year of 2018 in from the United States, that shouldn't have affected the price at the level that it was impacting it.
So the name of the report itself is the Case for Regulatory Oversight to Address Market Failure and it was written and the research conducted by Robin Allen and Mark Eliason, and this can be found online. We'll post it down in the
Description there.
description. And so another thing to take into account in terms of supply, the false narrative of supply issues for the Trans Mountain Pipeline is that the Trans Mountain Pipeline can transport 400,000 barrels a day, and that goes down to 300,000 if 20% of pipeline capacity for that day is unrefined crude, heavy crude oil. So there have never been, in recent times, in the last 11, 12 years, any time in which they've reached supply capacity. In fact, in 2019, for the first business quarter, around the time that the price spikes were happening, there was only 6% of heavy crude that was transported on the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which meant that they had, I believe it was 320,000, I believe it was, barrels capacity to be able to
they were only transporting 285,000 or something.
Yeah, exactly. So there was still room to be able to put some more barrels through the pipeline.
Yeah, the
so it was
report
nothing
was saying
like
there
that.
was the ability for in March and in January and February for there to be an extra 50,000 barrels coming. So there was no supply issue at the time of this price hike, and there hasn't been a supply issue since 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So and there hasn't been one before that necessarily, but this is like the main purview of this study is since 2015.
Yeah. And the reason why the beginning of this study starts at 2015 is because, in 2014 there was a drastic dip in the price of crude oil feedstock, and I think it was in January of 2014. It was a share was $120.
It was $100. It was $115
$115
US in June of 2014.
June 2014.
And then by January 2015, it was
like 42.
Or 47. Sorry.
Yeah, $47
per barrel.
And despite this dip in the price, this drastic dip in the price, we only saw a negligible decline in the price of at the pumps themselves. Yeah. And the crude oil feedstock is the only real variable that goes into the actual refining process. There's barely been any changes in the actual technology of refining itself.
So an important point from this is that up until 2014, from 2000, the margins for the price margins for the oil and gas companies were at 17.7 cents per liter, and afterwards it had and later in 2015 that had jumped to 28 cents per liter, and that's across Canada, and it's even more severe once you're in Vancouver. It's like by 2015 their margins were in the 30 cents per liter range, and now we've gotten to levels that are up to 70 cents per 60 and 70 cents per liter.
Yeah.
So they're just gouging the prices and not passing on the benefit of lower crude costs to the consumer, which is what would happen in a properly competitive market. But the thing is because they own the supply and the distribution, and on top of that, they have a political angle to be pushing, and because they want to be expanding their pipeline. So that's part of the reason why this supply narrative is pushed forward so much, is because they're trying to push the TMX through, which it has obviously been approved by now. But during this whole time, they've been saying that, that's going to be the solution to our problems. Kenny's saying, of course Vancouverites are pissed because they're paying $1.70 per liter. Why, if we just get this pipeline pushed through, then that'll alleviate the situation, and that's just not true, because we haven't reached capacity on our pipeline and on the current legacy pipeline, and as well, when the NEB gave them priority at the Westbridge dock to be reaching foreign markets, we haven't reached capacity of that dock either yet. So like the foreign markets that were planned to be developed haven't been developed yet, and currently we're in like a trade war with China. So I don't see, and that's the big what if is like, oh, can we trade with China? So they're pushing for this TMX pipe expansion for the sake of reaching foreign markets that haven't been developed yet, and that is only going to increase capacity and increase production in the oil sands, which is why this is a problem. It's not the pipeline isn't a problem because it might leak. Obviously, these are problems, but the reason why it's a problem is because it's going to increase production in the tar sands, and that's something that we can't have in the current climate.
And industry insiders have also said too that it's purely for export market too. Yeah. The reason to be able to twin the pipeline, so it isn't to be able to get any more product to the Lower Mainland itself.
And this report proves that, because we're not even to support the British Columbia market. We haven't even come close to we haven't even reached capacity yet on the legacy pipeline. So.
And in fact, the new pipeline that would be twinned would siphon off what was it? It was 50,000.
I think it was
40,000 barrels of heavy, of capacity itself towards the export market. So and also.
No, I'm sorry, that was 90,000 barrels.
It's 90,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so even more.
Yeah.
Even more hellacious.
Yeah.
And besides that, by twinning the actual pipeline itself too, to be able to pay for that construction, they're going to have to subsidize it, and to be able, and part of subsidizing it is increasing the tolls on the pipeline, which could see it increase 3 times it is right now. And as put up forth in the report, that could be as much as 5 cents extra at the pumps, anyways.
Yeah, because right now the toll per liter is on the legacy line is about $2.86 per barrel. And then that's going to go up to, and these were numbers from a couple of years ago when they were first planning the project, and things and situations have changed, so it might even be higher than this, but the number that was reported at the time was it will go up to around $5 per barrel. So in the end, that will reflect as a price increase on BC motorists, because in the end the legacy line is where we're going to be getting our domestic fuel from, and the expansion is for foreign markets. So we're going to be in the end we're going to be subsidizing the expansion, which we didn't want in the first place, at our pumps. And this is insanity, that people are accepting this, because they believed this narrative that we don't have a supply problem, that we have a supply problem, and that we're losing money based on the fact that we're buying from the U.S., which just isn't the case. And even if we were affected a little bit by the buying from the U.S., we're not it wouldn't be to the degree that it would be that we've been paying, because they often cite exchange rates as the reason why the U.S. oil costs more. But if at the most we've imported from the United States in the past 4 years is 15% of our usage. And if for that 15%, if we were paying the exchange rate on that 15%, it wouldn't show that every liter has gone up by the exchange rate. It would just be that many liters. So this idea that we're paying for the exchange rate, it's just not founded, and once you go through the logic of what people are saying.
We're also gambling on these export markets, because we have no idea exactly especially since this was conceived at a time before we've been in this trade war with China, and apparently they haven't built the proper refineries to be able to deal with the actual tar sands or with the heavy bitumen itself. And then there's the fact also too that China, more than Canada, is actually transitioning to green technology too. It's in Germany right now, a lot of the solar panels that Siemens is manufacturing right now is being sent out to China, which also cuts into the Conservative Party claim for their election platform that they want to be able to export clean, green Canadian technology towards them, when there's other countries around the world that are already doing that anyways. So it's they're not even, it seems as if the Conservative Party of Canada, the oil and gas lobbyists, the companies in general, they all have blinders on in terms of seeing they think that everyone's just going to accept what it is that they have. Yeah. And then also besides that too, it's like what ends up happening if, say, the largest petroleum reserves in the world, like Venezuela, what if like a military coup actually like happened, and someone like Juan Guaido was actually put in, right? And it was no longer the Maduro government, right? It's like, imagine if that was privatized and those oil reserves were opened up to the market. That would like lessen the attractiveness of the actual like tar sands bitumen itself, because they have all of that like that they're working against right now. Like for Alberta, it's great that those reserves are actually being like kept under the
and
Maduro government,
right?
Yeah,
because like not only are Venezuela's oil reserves sanctioned right now, so are Iran's. But if both of those were opened up to the world market, they're much cheaper to produce. And we're already now competing. And, like, this is one thing that they don't talk about enough in this debate, is the fact that, like, tar sands, it costs a lot to produce that. And we're competing now against the American fracking market, which is the most productive market on the planet for oil. And it's cheap. And, like, I don't see, and, like, China and the U.S. are working on a trade deal right now, so I don't see why they would take our heavy bitumen that they need to build special refineries for when they can get cheaper stuff from the United States after they end up in a trade deal. Or they'll continue to buy oil from Iran through backdoor dealings, which is sure. So like there's a lot, like in the end the point of this report was to find out if price gouging is real. And the thing is that it's clearly displayed that the price has been decoupled from the raw stock prices, and that the margins for these oil companies have been increasing since about 2014. And the thing is that it is disproportionately hitting Vancouver compared to, and the Lower Mainland as well as Vancouver Island, disproportionately to the rest of Canada, which is purely for the point of a political like coercion, basically, to make us feel the pain of not accepting a pipeline, and then giving us a pipeline as an answer to a problem that doesn't exist. And in the end, once that pipeline is built, we're going to be paying more at the pumps because we're subsidizing the building of that pipeline through the tolls coming down the legacy line. And it's like this is something that everybody needs to be paying attention to. These hearings are happening right now. The final report is going to be coming out in the beginning of August. But this is something that, like, if you're Canadian at all, but especially if you're from the Lower Mainland, this is really important news that's happening right now. That, like, we need to be watching the outcome of this, because, yes, if you're a conservative and you think there's too much tax on the gasoline, that is a conversation that reasonable people can have in a democracy. But the thing is that at the same time as we are paying taxes, a lot of taxes on our gas, we are paying corporate tax, and we're giving money to corporations that are not operating in a free market way. So like, even if you're like, this report is not some like lefty gobbledygook like that we would like personally, but like this is a very much talking about market forces, about the competitive nature of markets, and whether or not this market is competitive. And it's by several different rubrics it is shown not to be so. Yeah, so from the free market perspective itself, it's like you do have something that is oligopolistic, right? Yeah. Because like one of the tests, like the 4-firm test, which gauges how concentrated a market is in a given geographical location, it's established that, if you take out Husky as a refiner and a supplier, because they service central BC and northern BC, like specifically, there are 4 suppliers of petroleum products in the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island, and those are Parkland, Shell, Suncor, and Imperial, and there's 4 of them, and they service 100% of the market. So because of that, it's like it's clear that it is highly uncompetitive, that there is the distinct possibility that they're using price gouging measures just based off the fact that those are the fact that there's only 4 of them involved in this whole process. And this is also something that besides hurting British Columbians, it will eventually end up hurting like Alberta too, because not having Alberta has not diversified their market, their economy,
in the last couple of decades, like, hoping to just like, fall back on like the energy sector. In fact, a lot of energy insiders have been like, stating like quite militantly, it's like, we want to put all of our forces and everything that we have, and we want to be able to lobby government to be able to just focus on the energy sector within Alberta. But of course, the people that, the business interests and the investors that are involved with it, they stand to be able to gain from it, because a lot of them too will probably be able to stand to gain from, say like Iran and like in Venezuela too, because there's a lot of U.S. oil interests that are in like Alberta as well. So it's like if they have to make cutbacks in the specific sector of Alberta themselves, they're going to do that with like the workers themselves. They're going to do that with the truck drivers. They're going to do that with the people working the refineries and the people who are actually working on like in the tar sands themselves. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in the future, this isn't exactly about job creation, really, even for like Albertans to take into this consideration. This is more about them being able to make as much profit as possible. Yeah. And if they don't, and if they haven't, and if Alberta continues not to diversify their market, if they continue to cut the subsidies to like solar panels or anything like that, if they don't allow any possibilities like this, then they, they're only going to be hurting Albertans, because if like, if shit goes down, and there's say like mass firings or like laying off of people in Alberta who are working in the oil and gas sector, it's like without diversification, they're left stranded.
Definitely. So basically, just wanted to bring this a bit of this information from the report to you guys and show you where to go read it. Also, that you need to be paying attention to this happening right now. This is like something that we need to be watching, because like basically we have just corporations, big oil companies taking political punitive measures on us at the moment and trying to force us to accept something that like we didn't want to accept in the first place, and like extorting us basically. So like obviously the TMX has already been approved and it's probably going to go through and everything, but it's just important to know that you're being misled. And this report doesn't go into the fact that of why the media is lying or obfuscating the truth, at least to one way or another. And that's something that we're going to be looking more into in a later episode when we're talking about the petrobloc and how they operate.
And then also, it's like, as the actual public inquiry, like, comes to a head, we'll most definitely be doing reporting on that as well.
Definitely.
So stay tuned for the next episode.
Yep. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.